The day Earth said no. The arrival. The morning of August 15, 2156, started like any other day across planet Earth. People went to work, children played in parks, and the world continued its endless rhythm of life. Nobody expected that within hours, everything humanity knew about its place in the universe would change forever. At exactly 11:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, every telescope on Earth detected the same impossible sight. Something massive was emerging from the darkness beyond Neptune. Within minutes, amateur astronomers and professional scientists alike confirmed what seemed like science fiction brought to life. A structure larger than Earth's moon was approaching the solar system at speeds that defied known physics. The object revealed itself as it drew closer. It was not a natural celestial body. This was a vessel, a ship of such enormous proportions that the human mind struggled to comprehend its scale. The hull stretched for hundreds of kilometers, covered in materials that seemed to shift and shimmer with colors that had no names in human language. Lights pulsed across its surface in patterns that suggested intelligence, purpose, and power beyond anything humanity had ever created. First contact. Dr. Elena Reeves stood in the command center of the Global Space Agency headquarters in Geneva. She was a xenobiologist, someone who had spent her entire career preparing for a moment that most people thought would never come. At 42 years old, with her dark hair pulled back and her eyes fixed on the massive display screens, she watched humanity's first confirmed contact with alien intelligence unfold in real time. The ship took position between Earth and Mars, close enough to be visible to the naked eye from Earth's surface as a bright new star in the daylight sky. Communications satellites around the planet suddenly received the same broadcast simultaneously. The message was being transmitted in every human language, every dialect, every form of communication humanity had ever used. The technology required for such a feat was staggering. A holographic projection appeared in assembly halls, government centers, and public squares across the world. The figure that materialized was humanoid but distinctly alien. It stood over 3 meters tall, with deep crimson skin that seemed to absorb light. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands with 6 fingers. Its face bore 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern, and when it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. The Corvan Ultimatum. The being identified itself as Supreme Commander Vrath of the Corvan Empire. Its people had ruled a significant portion of the galaxy for over 8,000 years. They had encountered more than 200 different intelligent species during their expansion, and each one had joined the Empire's structure, benefiting from advanced technology and protection in exchange for loyalty and resources. Commander Vrath explained that Earth had been monitored for several centuries. Humanity had finally reached a level of development that made them worthy of contact. The Corvans were not invaders or conquerors in the traditional sense. They offered membership in a galactic civilization, access to technologies that would solve Earth's problems with energy, disease, and even death itself. The benefits were immense and immediate. However, there were requirements. Earth would need to accept Corvan oversight of its governments. Human colonies would provide labor for mining operations on resource-rich worlds. Earth's military forces would be disbanded and replaced with Corvan security. Most significantly, humanity would need to accept its position as a junior member of the Empire, learning from species far older and wiser than themselves. Secretary-General James Morrison led the unified Earth government from the United Nations building in New York. He was a career diplomat, someone who had spent decades negotiating between nations, cultures, and ideologies. At 65 years old, with silver hair and a calm demeanor that had served him well through countless crises, he faced the greatest challenge of his life. The Great Debate. The Corvans gave humanity 1 week to decide. Those 7 days became the most intense period of discussion, debate, and disagreement in human history. Every nation sent representatives to emergency sessions. Scientists, philosophers, military leaders, and ordinary citizens all had their voices heard through the newly established Global Decision Network. Dr. Reeves participated in the scientific advisory panel. She presented evidence that the Corvan technology was genuine. The scans of their ship showed power systems that operated on principles humanity barely understood. Their medicine could extend lifespans by centuries. Their ships could cross interstellar distances in weeks rather than millennia. Everything they promised was real and achievable. Admiral Marcus Chin commanded Earth's Combined Space Defense Force, a military organization that had been created decades earlier to protect humanity from potential threats from space. He was 58 years old, with sharp features and eyes that had seen combat during the resource wars of the 2130s. He presented a different perspective to the Council. The Admiral's analysis was stark. If humanity accepted the Corvan terms, they would be surrendering everything their ancestors had fought to achieve. Every war for independence, every revolution against tyranny, every struggle for freedom would become meaningless. Humanity would trade its sovereignty for comfort, its potential for security, and its future for an easy present. The debate raged across every platform humanity possessed. News networks broadcast discussions 24 hours a day. Social media exploded with opinions from every corner of the globe. Some argued that refusing such advanced beings was foolish pride. Others insisted that freedom was more valuable than any technology. Religious leaders offered spiritual guidance. Economists analyzed the benefits and costs. Ordinary people shared their hopes and fears. The answer. On the seventh day, Secretary-General Morrison stood before the assembled representatives of every nation on Earth. The voting had been completed. The decision was made. Cameras broadcast his words to every screen on the planet and transmitted them directly to the Corvan ship waiting in space. Morrison's voice was steady as he delivered humanity's response. Earth thanked the Corvan Empire for their offer and acknowledged the genuine benefits they presented. However, humanity had not survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless other challenges by accepting easy solutions that compromised their core values. Freedom was not a luxury humanity could trade away. Self-determination was not negotiable. Earth respectfully declined the Corvan Empire's offer. Humanity would chart its own course through the universe, making its own mistakes and achieving its own victories. They bore no ill will toward the Corvans, but they would not bow to anyone, no matter how advanced or powerful. The punishment. Commander Vratha's response came within the hour. The holographic projection reappeared, but this time the alien's demeanor had changed. There was no anger in its voice, only a kind of tired disappointment. Vrath explained that in 8,000 years of expansion, no species had ever refused the Empire's offer. Humanity's choice was unprecedented, foolish, and ultimately irrelevant. The Corvans would not waste resources conquering a single primitive world. Instead, they would employ a solution they had developed for exactly such situations. Earth would be isolated completely. A barrier would be erected around the entire solar system, preventing any ships, signals, or communication from entering or leaving. Humanity would be locked away from the galaxy until they either destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their current limitations. Dr. Reeves watched from the command center as the Corvan ship began to glow with increasing intensity. Energy readings spiked to levels that overloaded most of humanity's sensors. Something was being constructed around the solar system at impossible speeds. Within 6 hours, the work was complete. The change was visible from Earth's surface. The stars began to disappear, replaced by a shimmering field of light that enclosed the entire solar system like a sphere. Astronomers confirmed the horrible truth. Nothing could penetrate the barrier. Radio signals bounced back. Laser beams were absorbed. Even light from outside the solar system was blocked. Humanity was alone, cut off from the universe completely. Commander Vrath delivered one final message before the Corvan ship departed. The barrier would remain in place forever. Humanity had chosen isolation, and isolation they would receive. Within a few generations, the Empire would erase all records of Earth's existence. Humanity would be forgotten, a cautionary tale about pride and foolishness told to other species considering similar mistakes. The Corvan vessel vanished, leaving humanity trapped behind an impenetrable wall, facing an uncertain future with nothing but their own determination to guide them forward. The Cocoon Years. The Dark Period. The first 10 years after the barrier's establishment became known in history as the Dark Period. It was a time when hope seemed to drain from humanity like water through a cracked vessel. People looked up at the night sky and saw only the endless shimmer of their prison. The stars they had dreamed of reaching were gone, replaced by a constant reminder of their isolation. Economic systems that had been built on the promise of space exploration collapsed overnight. Companies that had invested billions in asteroid mining technology found their equipment useless. Nations that had planned colonies on Mars and beyond saw their dreams evaporate. The psychological impact was devastating. Depression rates skyrocketed. Suicide helplines were overwhelmed. Governments struggled to maintain order as people grappled with the reality of their situation. Secretary General Morrison aged visibly during those difficult years. He traveled constantly, visiting cities and towns across every continent, speaking to people who felt betrayed by the decision he had helped make. Some blamed him directly. Protests erupted in major cities, demanding answers about how humanity would survive. Critics argued that accepting the Corvin offer would have been better than this prison of their own making. The turning point. Dr. Elena Reeves refused to surrender to despair. She gathered a team of the brightest scientists on Earth and established the Barrier Research Initiative. Their facility was built in the Australian outback, far from the cities where hopelessness seemed to infect everyone it touched. If humanity was trapped, she reasoned, then understanding their cage was the first step toward eventual freedom. The research team worked 18-hour days, studying the barrier's properties. They fired every type of energy they could generate at it. They analyzed the patterns in its shimmer. They measured quantum fluctuations and gravitational effects. The barrier revealed itself to be incredibly sophisticated. It wasn't simply a wall, it was a field that existed partially outside normal spacetime, making conventional physics nearly useless for understanding it. Captain Sarah Mitchell served in the Space Defense Force that had become obsolete overnight. She was 34 years old, a pilot who had trained for missions beyond Earth that would never happen. Like many in the military, she felt purposeless in a world where the threats they had prepared for were no longer relevant. Admiral Chen recognized this crisis of purpose and began reorganizing the force with a new mission. The military transformed into the Exploration Corps. If humanity couldn't reach new star systems, they would explore and develop every resource in their own solar system. Captain Mitchell volunteered for the first mission to establish a permanent base on Mars. The colony effort had been abandoned after the barrier, but Chen argued that humanity needed to expand within their prison rather than stagnate on a single world. The speech that changed everything. 8 years after the barrier's establishment, Secretary General Morrison gave a speech that would be remembered for centuries. He was dying from cancer, his body failing despite the best medical treatment Earth could provide. He insisted on making one final address to humanity, broadcast from the same chamber where he had delivered Earth's refusal to the Corvins. Morrison spoke without notes, his voice weak but his words powerful. He acknowledged the pain and suffering the dark period had brought. He took responsibility for the consequences of the decision to refuse the empire. Then he shared a perspective that would reshape human consciousness for generations to come. The Corvins, he explained, had made a critical error in their judgment. They believed isolation would break humanity's spirit, that being cut off from the galaxy would cause humans to turn on each other in desperation. They didn't understand the fundamental truth about human nature that history had proven again and again. Humanity thrived on challenges. They grew stronger through adversity. Every major advancement in human civilization had come from responding to impossible situations with creativity and determination. Morrison compared the barrier to a cocoon. Inside, hidden from the galaxy's view, humanity would transform. They would develop technologies the Corvins never imagined. They would build a civilization that stretched across their entire solar system. And when the time came, when humanity finally found a way to break through their prison, they would emerge not as the species the Corvins had dismissed, but as something far greater. His final words became a promise that parents would repeat to their children for 800 years. They thought they were locking us away to be forgotten. They were actually giving us time to become unstoppable. The Great Transformation. Morrison's death 3 months after his speech became a catalyst for change. Cities around the world held memorial services that transformed into rallies for humanity's future. The despair that had dominated the dark period began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to prove the Corvins wrong. Dr. Reeves' research team made their first major breakthrough 15 years after the barrier's establishment. They discovered that while the barrier blocked physical matter and most forms of energy, it didn't completely stop the flow of fundamental particles called neutrinos. This tiny crack in their prison became humanity's window to study physics in ways that had never been possible before. The research led to the development of quantum manipulation technology years ahead of any natural development timeline. Scientists learned to control particle behavior at scales smaller than atoms. This knowledge revolutionized energy production. The first working fusion reactor came online 43 years after the barrier, providing nearly unlimited clean power to Earth's cities. Captain Mitchell, now promoted to colonel, commanded the growing Mars colony. The settlement had expanded from a small research outpost to a city of 50,000 people. Underground facilities stretched for kilometers beneath the red surface. Hydroponic farms fed the population. Factories manufactured equipment using resources mined from Martian soil. Children born on Mars had never seen Earth except through video feeds. The Solar System Empire. 100 years after the barrier, humanity had transformed beyond recognition. Earth's population had stabilized at 8 billion, with another 2 billion spread across dozens of colonies throughout the solar system. Cities existed beneath the ice of Europa, Jupiter's moon. Mining operations extracted rare materials from the asteroid belt. Scientific stations orbited every planet, conducting research that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Medical science had conquered most diseases. Genetic therapy could repair damaged DNA. Nanotechnology allowed doctors to target cancer cells with precision. The average human lifespan extended to 150 years, with many scientists predicting it would reach 200 within another century. Death from old age was becoming rare rather than inevitable. Admiral Marcus Chen, now 158 years old but appearing no older than 60 due to medical advances, commanded a space defense force that had grown to include thousands of warships. These vessels weren't built for exploration, they were designed for combat. Chen had spent decades studying military history and alien warfare tactics that humanity had learned about from the Corvin broadcasts before the barrier. He understood that when humanity finally emerged from isolation, they might face hostility. The ships Chen's forces developed incorporated technology that Earth's scientists had created specifically because they were trapped. Quantum shields could deflect energy weapons. Fusion drives could accelerate vessels to significant fractions of light speed within the solar system. Weapon systems used principles that the Corvins had never demonstrated, suggesting humanity was discovering things the ancient empire had never considered. The inheritance. By year 200 after the barrier, entire generations had been born, lived, and died knowing only the shimmering wall that enclosed their civilization. Children learned in school about the Corvin Empire and Earth's refusal, but these were historical facts rather than living memory. The barrier had become a natural part of their universe, like gravity or time. Yet the promise remained alive. Every child heard Morrison's final speech. Every school taught the history of humanity's choice and the reason for their isolation. The dream of eventual freedom was woven into the cultural fabric of human civilization. Artists created works depicting the day the barrier would fall. Writers crafted stories about humanity's triumphant return to the galaxy. Musicians composed symphonies celebrating freedom that hadn't yet been achieved. Dr. Reeves, who lived to be 187 years old, established the Barrier Studies Institute before her death. She ensured that every generation included dedicated scientists whose sole purpose was understanding and eventually breaking their prison. The institute became one of the most prestigious research organizations in human space, attracting the brightest minds from every colony. Progress continued across every field of human endeavor. Artificial intelligence reached levels of sophistication that allowed computers to partner with human researchers in solving complex problems. Quantum computing made calculations possible that would have taken centuries using old technology. Materials science produced substances stronger than anything found in nature, perfect for building ships and stations that could withstand extreme conditions. The long view. 300 years after the barrier, humanity's solar system had become an empire in everything but name. Dozens of worlds hosted permanent populations. Thousands of stations provided homes for billions of people. The asteroid belt had been partially dismantled and converted into construction material for habitats and ships. Venus was being slowly terraformed using atmospheric processors that would take centuries to complete but promised to eventually create a second Earth-like world. The military had grown to include specialized divisions for different types of combat. Space-to-space warfare specialists trained in zero-gravity environments. Planetary assault forces prepared for operations on worlds with varying gravity and atmosphere. Intelligence divisions studied everything humanity knew about alien species, preparing for the day when contact would resume. But beneath all this preparation and development, a fundamental question remained unanswered. How could humanity break through a barrier that had been designed by a civilization 8,000 years more advanced? The Barrier Studies Institute had made progress in understanding the prison's structure, but understanding something and defeating it were different challenges entirely. Generation after generation of scientists attacked the problem from new angles. They tried to find weaknesses in the barrier's quantum structure. They experimented with exotic particles and theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. They built massive instruments designed specifically to probe the barrier's secrets, searching for any hint of vulnerability. The work continued, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Humanity prepared for a future they couldn't yet reach, building an empire in the darkness, waiting for the moment when the cocoon would finally crack and they could emerge into the light of a galaxy that had forgotten they existed. The question wasn't whether humanity would find a way through. The question was what they would become during the long wait, and what the galaxy would face when Earth's children finally returned to claim their place among the stars.